In November 1957, police in the small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, were searching for a missing woman named Bernice Worden. They were about to make one of the most gruesome discoveries in U.S. criminal history.
One of them turned on his flashlight and beamed it around and saw this object that was hanging from the rafters, which at first they thought was some kind of gutted deer. They realized, to their incredible horror, that it was a woman's corpse that was hanging by its heels.
The twisted killer was a quiet loner named Ed Gein. Hidden inside the 51-year-old's rural farmhouse was a ghoulish treasure trove of human remains.
There was a lampshade made of human skin. They found the remains of 12 human heads, gloves made out of the skin from a corpse's fingers.
You think of this happening, now, it'd still be shocking. But back then, in a small, tiny rural community, it was breathtaking.
America had woken up inside the nightmare of Ed Gein, one of the world's most evil killers. Some crimes of Ed Gein horrified 50s America. When his rural home was searched on the 16th of November 1957, the police uncovered a Gothic house of horrors. As well as the remains of 2 missing local women, they found an array of human bones, skulls, and skin that had been fashioned into furniture and clothing. The town of Plainfield was in complete shock.
I think shock would be the biggest thing that we could use to describe the atmosphere in the community. It took your breath away, it was shocking.
When Bernice Worden turned her back to him, he shot her in the back of the head and then loaded her corpse in his truck and drove back to his farm. He was very perplexed by that. And then he saw a trail of blood across the floor of the hardware store, and not only realized, that some foul play had occurred, but immediately suspected Ed Gein, because Gein had been kind of bothering his mother for the past few weeks.
When they went to search the place, they found the receipt for the antifreeze that was in Ed's name. And they just worked backwards, saying that he was probably the last person to see her alive, but they didn't suspect that he was as deranged as he was.
And then another set of lawmen went out to Gein's farmhouse, and that's where they made these discoveries that really sent shockwaves around the world.
On a dark winter's night, officers from the Plainfield Police Department began to search the Gein farm for Bernice Worden.
This property didn't have any electricity, so they were pretty much fumbling around in the dark with flashlights, but I don't think they expected to find what they did find there.
One of them turned on his flashlight and beamed it around and saw this object that was hanging from the rafters, which at first they thought was some kind of gutted deer. Although it didn't look like a deer, they realized, to their incredible horror, that it was a woman's corpse that was hanging by its heels and been completely gutted.
She'd been strung up, essentially, and she was slit from her sternum to her pelvis. So she'd essentially been butchered by Ed. It really was the most grotesque thing that these officers had ever come across.
And they realized they had found the body of Bernice Worden. And of course, both of them just stumbled out in horror and vomited, at the sight of this thing.
When the news spread across the town, the residents of Plainfield were in complete shock. After finding the butchered body of Bernice Worden in a shed at Ed Gein's farm, the police officers moved their search into the main house.
Amid all that wreckage, they discovered these incomprehensible, unspeakably awful objects that had been fashioned out of human body parts. There were chairs that were upholstered in human flesh.
There was a lampshade made of human skin. They found the remains of 12 human heads, gloves made out of the skin from a corpse's fingers.